Wow, wow, wow. Shocking news in the National Football League. The longest tenured head coach in football, Mike Tomlin, stepping down from the Pittsburgh Steelers today. Here's some sports news for your timeline people. See, Mike Tomlin won a Super Bowl in Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin never had a losing season. I repeat, the man never had a losing season in 19 years. Only coach in the history of the National Football League that can say that. But what can we learn from this? That good is the enemy of great. See, Mike Tomlin consistently good for the last 10 years, but his last 7 times he went to the playoffs, he lost the very first game. It got so bad for Mike Tomlin that during the course of the season, his own home crowd was chanting, "Fire Tomlin."
Mike Tomlin didn't get fired. He didn't get summoned into some tense, closed-door meeting where an owner quietly slid a folder across the table and said, "We're moving on." That never happened. And that detail matters more than people realize because it completely flips the narrative in a league that chews coaches up, spits them out, and rarely gives anyone the dignity of control on the way out. This wasn't rejection, this was choice. Mike Tomlin walked away on his own terms, and in the NFL, that's one of the loudest statements you can make without raising your voice. It wasn't just the end of an era in Pittsburgh. It was a shockwave felt across front offices, locker rooms, and ownership suites around the league. The Pittsburgh Steelers don't do chaos. They don't do panic resets. They don't do "we'll figure it out later." They do structure, patience, and long tenures.
Wow, wow, wow. Shocking news in the National Football League. The longest tenured head coach in football, Mike Tomlin, stepping down from the Pittsburgh Steelers today. Here's some sports news for your timeline people. See, Mike Tomlin won a Super Bowl in Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin never had a losing season. I repeat, the man never had a losing season in 19 years. Only coach in the history of the National Football League that can say that. But what can we learn from this? That good is the enemy of great. See, Mike Tomlin consistently good for the last 10 years, but his last 7 times he went to the playoffs, he lost the very first game. It got so bad for Mike Tomlin that during the course of the season, his own home crowd was chanting, "Fire Tomlin." Make that make sense. Some could suggest that the fan base got spoiled. Others could suggest that it's a win now league. See, colloquially, the NFL stands for not for long. And he lasted 19 years. I tip my hat to Mike Tomlin. I salute Mike Tomlin. And more than anything, I respect that it was Mike Tomlin stepping down and that someone that magnificent didn't get.
That's what made this hit different. And the timing made it even heavier. This wasn't some quiet off-season decision buried under draft prep and free agency buzz. This came after weeks of reflection in February, right after a brutal wild card loss to the Houston Texans. A loss that didn't feel fluky or unlucky, but final. The Steelers looked like a team that had reached the end of its rope emotionally and structurally. The offense stalled when urgency was required. Opportunities came and went with no spark, no killer instinct, no sense that another gear existed. What hit fans hardest wasn't just the scoreboard, it was the feeling. The Steelers looked flat, predictable, and stuck in neutral when the moment demanded aggression. That's why the announcement felt like a curtain dropping instead of a page turning. Tomlin didn't leave after a bad season. He left after another season that ended the same way fans had grown numb to. Solid regular season, playoff ticket punched, then a postseason exit that didn't sting because of heartbreak, but because of inevitability.
What is it like for you personally when they're calling for you to go?
In general, I agree with them. From this perspective, football is our game. We're in the sport entertainment business. And so if you root for the Steelers, entertaining them is winning. And so when you're not winning, it's not entertaining. And if you've been in this business, you understand that. And so I respect it. I share frustrations. I understand what makes this thing go, and winning is what makes this thing go.
It felt like a reality check, not a tragedy. And when a coach like Tomlin, a coach who has weathered every storm imaginable, decides he's done, it's never about one night. It's about everything that's been stacking up quietly for years. For a long time, Tomlin's greatest strength was also his greatest shield. 19 seasons. Not one losing year, not once did his team finish under .500. That statistic became the headline of his resume and the automatic rebuttal to every critic. Quarterback chaos didn't matter. Injuries piling up didn't matter. Roster turnover didn't matter. The Steelers always competed. That's not normal. That's not luck. That's coaching at its highest level. In most cities, that stat alone buys you unlimited job security. In Pittsburgh, it bought Tomlin respect, but eventually it also created a ceiling that fans couldn't ignore. Because never having a losing season is impressive.
Official?
That's what I keep hearing. So, is he a candidate here?
Holy shit, Mike, wouldn't that be awesome? Only if John takes the Pittsburgh job. Wow, wouldn't that be interesting? I don't know, that thing last week maybe disqualified him for my opening after our kicker.
Until you realize it can also mean you've been living in the same neighborhood for a decade without ever upgrading the view. And this is where the Pittsburgh standard starts to squeeze the air out of the room. Steelers fans don't celebrate 9 wins. They don't hang banners for competitive. They don't care about moral victories or respectable exits. This franchise is built on legacy, and legacy in Pittsburgh is measured in January. As the playoff win drought stretched, not the drought of getting in, but the drought of actually winning when it mattered, the noise got louder. Not reckless noise, not hot take noise, but that deep, uncomfortable rumble that comes when expectations are unmet year after year. Tomlin's teams became a riddle. How could they be so stable and yet so limited? How could they be so disciplined and yet so predictable? How could they always be good, but never great when the lights were brightest? That question followed him every postseason. And even though the locker room never quit on him and ownership never wavered publicly, the weight of that question doesn't disappear. It sits with you. It follows you home. It grows louder every January when another season ends the same way. So when Tomlin finally chose to step away, it wasn't surrender. It was clarity. It was an acknowledgement that stability without progression eventually turns into stagnation. And in Pittsburgh, stagnation is the one thing that's never tolerated for long. This wasn't the Steelers pushing out a legend. This was a legend recognizing that the standard he helped protect was now demanding something different. Always good enough to matter, but never consistent enough to finish the story. And eventually, good enough becomes more frustrating than bad because bad at least gives you clarity. Bad lets you reset. Good enough keeps you trapped in place, spinning the same wheel year after year. That's the purgatory the Pittsburgh Steelers have been living in. You keep picking in the middle of the draft. You keep selling hope instead of dominance. You keep convincing yourself that one tweak, one fix, one lucky break will finally push you over the top.
Dismiss Mike Tomlin not having a losing record in 2 decades as a head coach in one spot. That's hard to do. When your name is being mentioned with Tom Landry and Bill Belichick for that kind of accomplishment, I'm not going to disrespect you in terms of the caliber of coach that you are.
Right.
I think this is a situation, if you're Pittsburgh, you should beg Mike Tomlin to want to be there. But if you're Mike Tomlin, why would you want to stay? The organization hasn't been serious about getting a franchise quarterback. Now, you've been complicit in that in terms of some of the decisions that have been made, but this is a results-based business. And the reality is that Mike Tomlin routinely gets more out of players that are nondescript than other coaches around the National Football League. I think this could be a scenario setting up where Mike Tomlin takes a beat from the NFL, does what Sean Payton did in his last season with the New Orleans Saints in 2021, got out of it, got the TV, and then found an opportunity for a better job. And then a couple of years from now, we could be talking about Mike Tomlin being right back at the top of his respective conference with a different organization because he's that kind of coach. Yeah. To me, the fact that we're having this conversation is a referendum on the Pittsburgh Steelers as an organization. It is not the same organization that had Dan Rudy leading it once upon a time or Art Rooney, not the second, the first. This is a different franchise, and the results are what they are. 7 straight one-and-dones in the playoffs, an NFL record, 5 straight postseason losses by double digits. Yeah. You are no longer a championship-caliber organization. Wow. That is the reality. Mike Tomlin talks a lot about the standard being the standard. Well, that bar has been lowered in Pittsburgh, and we have come to expect early.
And every year, you keep watching the real contenders separate themselves while you're still stuck, explaining why it didn't quite work. Even when the coach is respected, even when the locker room is stable, even when the standard is still preached. That's what makes this moment so revealing. Because when Mike Tomlin stepped away, it wasn't just a coaching decision. It was an acknowledgement of that trap. When you're in that position as a coach, You're not just fighting opponents anymore. You're fighting the system you helped build. You're fighting expectations that can't be met without a full reset. You're fighting time. This past season put all of it on full display. Once again, the Steelers found themselves managing instability at quarterback. Patchwork solutions, short-term answers, constant conversations about if this guy plays clean or if that unit stays healthy. That's not how true contenders talk. That's how teams survive, not dominate. And here's the part fans don't always want to hear. Stability can turn into a blind spot. Everyone loves consistency until they realize consistency without evolution becomes stagnation. Everyone thinks the grass is greener somewhere else until they're standing in the yard asking, wait, what did we just lose? Because there aren't many leaders like Tomlin. That's the uncomfortable truth. You don't replace presence with a resume. You don't replace command with a playbook. You don't replace credibility with buzzwords. And that's why the next era might be rougher than Steelers fans are ready for. It's easy to complain when you're always competitive. It's easy to nitpick when your floor is high. But the second that floor drops, the noise changes fast. Suddenly, 9 wins doesn't feel disappointing. It feels unreachable. Suddenly, discipline matters. Suddenly, leadership matters. And suddenly, everyone realizes how rare Tomlin actually was. Now flip the camera to Tomlin himself, because this is where the story gets terrifying for the rest of the league.
Experts and all the experts on TV now who make it seem like they know what the hell they're talking about. To me, that's an absolute joke. Obviously, Matt's done a lot of great things in Green Bay, and we had a lot of success. Mike T has had more success than damn near anybody in the league. I've talked extensively about how I feel about Mike, and I just did.
If Mike Tomlin wants another head coaching job, he can have one immediately. There is no waiting period. There is no credibility check. There is no awkward interview where owners wonder if he's the guy. He's already proven it. Super Bowl champion. Decades of respect. A resume that speaks before he ever opens his mouth. If he wants to coach again, he's not waiting by the phone. He's choosing his situation. He's choosing alignment, power, and vision. And here's the wild part. The Steelers technically still hold his coaching rights because he was under contract. That means this could turn into trade conversations. Real ones. Imagine a coach being valuable enough that teams might actually have to negotiate assets just to hire him. Picks, compensation, leverage. That's how rare he is. And if Tomlin decides coaching isn't the next move, television will throw money at him. Networks crave authenticity. They crave authority. They crave someone who doesn't sound manufactured. Tomlin has all of that without trying. He's not a loud guy. He's not a catchphrase machine. But when he speaks, people listen. Players listen. Coaches listen. Fans listen. He's the type of presence that can change the tone of an entire broadcast just by sitting in the chair.
I like what he said. But what's one thing you always say as players that you got to do each year?
Update that resume.
You got to update your resume, even as a head coach. So it's reflecting you as a coach if you're not winning.
What are we measuring success by? Because at the end of the day, I thought our job is to win championships. Even as a player, Peyton Manning did not have a lifetime contract with the Colts. Tom Brady did not have a lifetime contract with the Patriots. Aaron Rodgers. Boy, you won both MVPs. You won a Super Bowl MVP.
Right.
In the words of Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately? That's what we are now, Ocho.
Ooh, yeah.
Look, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I think Coach Landry won his last Super Bowl in the mid-70s. This is not like a marriage, rich and poor and sickness and in health. No! I can lead this relationship, bro. I'm not getting the fulfillment out of it that I need. That's just the way it is, Ocho. My girlfriend said all the time, boy, it's hard, but it's fair. Sad, but it's...
That's why this decision doesn't feel like retirement. It feels like a pivot. It feels like a man stepping away from one battlefield because he already understands his value on the next one. So don't treat Tomlin stepping down like a resignation letter. Treat it like a warning. A man who has survived everything the NFL can throw at you doesn't leave because he's weak. He leaves because he sees the storm before everyone else does. He leaves because he understands exactly what it costs to keep fighting the same war. Year after year, season after season, message after message, pushing the same boulder uphill while pretending the hill hasn't gotten steeper. And at some point, the cost becomes higher than the reward. That's what this moment really is. Not a defeat, not an embarrassment, not some dramatic collapse. This is a calculated ending by a man who knows himself, knows the league, and knows when a chapter has reached its natural conclusion. This isn't quitting. This is clarity. Mike Tomlin didn't walk away because he ran out of answers. He walked away because he knew the answers he still had would require a price he no longer needed to pay. That matters, because in the NFL, most coaches don't get to choose the moment. The moment chooses them. Tomlin took control of his. Now the pressure shifts fully onto the Pittsburgh Steelers. For the first time in decades, they have to prove something that they've never truly been forced to prove before. That the Steelers' way exists beyond one man. That the standard isn't tied to one voice, one presence, one authority in the room. This franchise has sold continuity for generations. Stability, identity, discipline. But all of that was reinforced daily by Tomlin's command. His ability to walk into a locker room and instantly own it. His ability to speak once and have it carry weight. His ability to calm storms before they became hurricanes. Without that, everything gets tested. Every assumption, every tradition, every slogan. Because culture doesn't survive change just because you say it will. Culture survives when leadership replaces leadership, not just resumes replacing resumes. And here's the danger. If the Steelers get this hire wrong, the "we never have losing seasons" era could vanish faster than anyone expects. Once that floor drops, it drops hard. Once instability creeps in, it multiplies. Suddenly patience runs thin. Suddenly mistakes feel louder. Suddenly the fan base realizes how fragile consistency actually is. But there's another side to this too. If they get it right, really right, Pittsburgh could reinvent itself. They could modernize without losing identity. They could become dangerous again, not just respected. Dangerous in January. Dangerous when it matters most. That's the fork in the road. There's no middle ground anymore. This isn't about staying afloat. This is about direction. And either way, one thing is already undeniable. Mike Tomlin leaving the Steelers marks the end of the safest era Pittsburgh has known in a generation. No drama, no implosion. Just the quiet disappearance of certainty. For nearly 20 years, the Steelers woke up knowing who they were, knowing who was in charge, knowing what the floor looked like. That security is gone now, and the rest of the NFL is watching closely because they understand exactly what this means. A leader like Mike Tomlin doesn't just walk into availability quietly. He changes the market. He changes power dynamics. He changes conversations in owner meetings and front offices. Whether he coaches again or not, his presence is no longer locked behind one sideline. And that alone shifts the balance. Teams know it. Players know it. Executives know it. This wasn't just the end of a tenure. It was the release of a force back into the league. And when someone with that level of credibility, authority, and control steps into the open, the ripple effects don't stop at one city. They spread. And that's why this ending doesn't feel like closure. It feels like the beginning of something the NFL hasn't fully braced for yet.